skid, because otherwise you're gonna get this kind of movement that you don't really want. You see how this is all loose here? This shouldn't be that way. Hey guys, welcome back to Revolution XRC. In this part of the Element Enduro Builders Kit build series, we are going to be adding some parts from Club5 Racing as well as Brazin Scale RC. For Club5 Racing, we'll be adding high clearance links right here, and we'll also be adding bushings for the shocks. And for Brazin RC, I bought their Element Enduro shock hoops, but I'll only be using the front since I have the rock parts shock towers in the rear. So I'll put a link to all of these things in the description below, and let's get started. So here are the shock towers for the Brazin Scale RC setup. This one has an integrated Panhard mount, and it's raised up a little bit higher than the stock one. So you'll see here, it's probably got 15 to 20 millimeters of height above the stock Panhard mount location, and that's basically what I want to do. I want to raise this part of the suspension up or lower the chassis down in the front, and to do that I'm going to move this shock position from the stock location to somewhere in the rear here to prevent lifting on climbs. And to do that, I'd also need to raise the Panhard mount. So this is where these come in handy. And at the same time, I'll be using these shock bushings. You'll notice the stock ones, they have that little wiggle at the top right here. These Club5 Racing shock bushings get rid of that. So that would be kind of nice to take care of as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the front. And since these shock towers do use countersunk screws, you'll have to find the equivalent in a button head screw. I believe these are 3x12s. Once again, I have 3x12 button head screws right here. Go ahead and open up these shock bushings. Alright, this is the way these shock bushings work. You've got 4 of the lower pivot balls and 4 of the upper pivot balls. The upper pivot balls look like bow ties, and that's where you want to put the O-rings on. So go ahead and put the O-rings on the upper pivot balls. Put it on one side first. You'll put the other side on later after putting it through the shock. See here, it'll stop, so you'll need to put the other side on after you put it through the top of the shock. So let's go ahead and do this one right now. And basically what these O-rings do, they prevent that movement of the shock. There we go. Okay. Yep. So you can see there's no slide there at the top of the shock. And it looks like I'll need a spacer to space out from the hoop. If it's anything like the rear, it should be about 5 millimeters, I believe. So I'll go ahead and find a 5 millimeter spacer to use. Alright, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the Panhard rod back onto this new Panhard mount. Just because I need to kind of figure out the correct spacers I need for these shocks between the shock tower and the top of the shocks, especially with these new Club 5 bushings. So we'll go ahead and do that. I think I would. Alright, I'm just going to finger tighten it for now. And I'm just going to figure out what exact spacing I need from the top of the shock towers. So it looks like I might need at least a 3 millimeter, which I have here. Try that out. Alright, 3 millimeter looks just about right. I think I like the way that looks. And on this side, I'm gonna need, since I've only got a 65 millimeter link left and it's gotta be 73 between the shock towers, I'm gonna use a 4 millimeter spacer and then add the link. Now I might need a longer screw here, so I will take a look at what screws I can use. Alright, I might need a 3x30, so I'll go ahead and check that out. So it looks like I'm going to need two M3x30s. Here, 3 millimeter spacer, and the shock tower, 4 millimeter spacer, and then the link. Alright, let's take a look at that. So far the distance seems okay. I might have to use a 4 millimeter spacer here, but I'll try it out with the 3 first. So far it looks like it'll clear. Let me go ahead and take care of the other side just so I can get a better feel of what I need. Okay, once again we'll replace that with two M3x10 button head screws. Or sorry, M3x12. Okay, I finally found two M3x12 button head screws. It's amazing how fast I go through these. Add another 4 millimeter spacer here, and the M3x30 screw on this side. Oh wait, shock tower. Alright, so let's go ahead and put one of these on first, and the O-ring. Now on the other side we wanted that 3 millimeter spacer, and it was just here a minute ago. Looks out here. Now, I thought I might have to space out the bottom, and I still think I do. Or do I? But the rig is definitely sitting lower. You can see how putting it at that angle kind of leveled out the chassis between the rear shock towers and the front. So it's definitely lower now. I just gotta make sure that these shocks are clearanced enough and that they're straight up and down. I think on the rear I might have to add some spacers to the bottom link mounts as well. So I'll go ahead and take a look at that and we'll be right back. Okay, I've decided to try a 3mm spacer here at the bottom first for the front and rear. We're gonna have to change the bottom pivot balls anyway, so we'll give that a shot. Just get rid of that plastic pivot ball here. Now if I do that, I'm going to have to use longer screws here. So once again, I'm going to have to look for longer screws. I'll be right back. Alright, I've actually decided to add a 2mm spacer to the bottom of the shock here. So I'll use an M3x16 screw instead of an M3x14. Let's go ahead and put that screw through the pivot ball here. Let's also add that spacer. Alright guys, you probably just missed a bunch of stuff because the camera ran out of batteries while I was putting something together. This part of the build just has not gone as planned, running out of screws, running out of batteries. Anyway, I am using a M3x16 to attach the bottom of the shock along with a 2mm spacer. I've already done it on this side. I'm going to do the same on this side. Hopefully this battery doesn't run out. Okay, so far what I've done here, I've added a 65mm link. Inside I've got 4mm spacers on each side. On the outside here I have a 3mm spacer. And at the bottom I've used a 2mm spacer on each side right there. So now we'll have to move to the rear. I've already removed one. Basically we're gonna have to redo the spacer system here because we will be changing the pivot balls to the Club5 ones, so you'll need a different length of spacer. So let's go ahead and remove this right now. And we'll put the new pivot ball in along with the O-ring. There we go. Okay. Now if the front isn't any indication, I will be using 3mm spacer with the screw right here. And I just realized that I didn't put the washer on the other side in the front, so I'll go back and do that. You see there's the washer there. You want to keep that on just in case. I have that little tiny spacer here. That's a 1.5. thread through. And we'll go ahead and tighten that back up. Just make sure it's got some clearance. Good. Now we gotta change the bottom as well. Go ahead and do that. Alright, so I plan to use 3mm in the rear instead of 2 that I used in front, just to kind of widen it out a little. Yep. Let's go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Maybe we'll start with the bottom first. Maybe it's going to be easier to take care of than replacing the top first. Okay. Okay. Can't seem to remember what screw I just used. I guess a longer one. Okay, let's take care of the top now. Alright, who would have thought that putting shock bushings on would be such a pain? They usually aren't. I've actually done them once before on my Element Sendero. For whatever reason, I was just struggling this time. Must be the weather. Anyway, I'm gonna have to remove these right now because I gotta redo them. Forgot to put the washer on, which I want to do. So let me go ahead and do that right now. Alright, we're finished with the Club5 Racing shock bushings, front and rear. We can now move on to the high clearance links, and hopefully that'll go a lot more smoothly than these shock bushings did. Like I said again, the shock bushings usually are not that much trouble to put on. For whatever reason, I'm just having a difficult day, and they were just being difficult for me, but we're ready to move on. Oh, one thing I did forget to mention. Since these shock towers raise the axle up, you're going to have an issue with the servo getting in the way. So the trick is you're going to have to remove the servo, and you're going to put it on the top, or mount it on the other side of the servo mount. So I'm going to remove the servo right now, which unfortunately probably means I got to remove these shocks again, more links. But better to do it now than later. Alright, so here's what comes with the Club5 Racing High Clearance Link. Really nice set, really nice rod ends, as well as metal pivot balls. So it's a really nice set to get. I'll put a link to this in the description below. Okay, I'm just going to start putting these links together. This one before. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and build the rest of these, and we'll be right back when I'm done. Alright, I've got the rod ends all put on. Before I move on, one thing I noticed with the previous Club 5 high clearance links that I got for my Sendero, they used different rod ends, so I'm not sure why they changed it. I kind of like the old ones better. You'll see that it covers this little notch here, but I guess these will work. I might switch it up for these rod ends in the future. I think you can get these anywhere. These are like Traxxas rod ends. I think these are too, but these are the ones that have the little hex shape on them, as well as the inner circumference to cover this part of the link right there, that little gap. So something I'll look into. Let's see how the length of those. Yeah, should be about the same. So maybe that's something I might look into later. Anyway, we'll go ahead and pop in the pivot balls, and they're the same on both sides, so I don't think it matters what side you put them on. Both flanges are the same size. These ProTech RC shock pliers are really handy. Okay, and the links are now completely put together. You should have 210mm links, which are the front lower links. You should have 100mm front upper link, one of them. You should have two 117mm, I think it's this one here. Two 117mm rear upper links and two 125mm rear lower links. Let's go ahead and start with the front upper link. Now you want the longer edge near the skid and the angled edge near the axle. Okay. Alright, that's the front upper link installed. Let's go ahead and move on to the front lower links. Getting a little binding with these rod ends and probably the screw here. I'm wondering if I have to use a shorter screw. Let's check that out. If I back up the screw a little bit. Yeah, so let me see if I can use a different size cap screw. Alright, I think this is around the 12mm I'm gonna see if this fits. If it doesn't fit, I'm gonna have to figure something out. See if it threads all the way through. Alright, seems to fit and seems like it'll work, but I just gotta make sure that it's gonna hold the link mount in place well enough. So give me a second while I go and double check this. Alright, so what I did here is for these link mounts, I left the, I believe it's either M2.5 by 14 or 15, probably 14. I left it 14mm length at the top, and at the bottom one I replaced it with a 12mm one, because that way it frees up this rod end from any binding. Like you'll see right there that that screw is sticking out and it's actually touching the top of the rod end. So I'm not sure if this is going to be, this 12mm length is going to be long enough. If it's not, I'm going to take this and I'm just going to grind like 2 threads off of the tip of this, and that should be enough. So let's go ahead and finish putting on this link here. Oh, I think I use a different driver. Alright, that comes out. This new one comes in. Stop right about there. And there is one link. Go ahead and do all the others now. Alright, I just figured out why I felt something was wrong with these links. My old set actually came with these different types of pivot balls for the link mounts as well as the skid. Now you can see here that this type of pivot ball is flanged on one side and the other side doesn't have a flange. All the pivot balls that were provided in this set were all of the same type with 2 flanges on each side. The problem is you kind of need these at the link mounts and at the skid, because otherwise you're going to get this kind of movement that you don't really want. You see how this is all loose here? This shouldn't be that way. And so I'm going to, fortunately I have extra pivot balls of this shape or this style, and I'm going to use, let's see, you're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. I hope I have 8 of them, but just make sure. I'm going to hit up Club5 to see if they can provide me with this type of pivot ball. If not, I'm going to have to go and get some if I don't have enough. But I'll definitely bring this up with Club5. It seems to be an issue. Definitely isn't supposed to be this way. My Sendero definitely doesn't have this issue, and my Sendero actually came with different types of rod ends and the correctly flanged one side flange pivot balls for the link mounts and the skid. So I'm going to see if I have enough of those, and we'll be right back. Okay, as I explained earlier, these pivot balls don't work great here, so it looked like this one works just fine, and it doesn't use that same capture system that the lower links does. So I think I'm just going to swap out the pivot balls on the lower links. And this is the pivot ball that I'm going to replace it with. You can see here the difference between the supplied pivot ball right here and this one right here. And already I could feel the tighter tolerances. I had to back out the screw a little bit just to get the link in. Alright, no movement on this side. Now we gotta take care of this side. One thing I did forget to do is I forgot to thread lock. Remember how I mentioned I was going to do it in the other video, but I didn't yet because I knew I was going to do this? Well, for the link mount specifically, you probably want to use thread lock. Alright, you can see here that wiggle's gone. So much better than the supplied pivot balls. Alright, so let's continue. I'm just going to pop these pivot balls out. Once again, before we go ahead, I'm going to have to replace this screw with the shorter M3x12 or M2.5x12 cap screw. This will interfere with the link mount. And we'll have to I may just end up eventually just grinding down the stock screws or the screws that came with the link mounts a little bit, because it just gives it the full length of the link mount, full threading. But I think this will do for now. I'll launch it. Okay, that is the front set of high clearance links. And these other pivot balls work much better. You don't get that side to side movement here at the pivot ball. So definitely need to swap out those pivot balls if you get the if you get this kind. If you get the other kind like I got from my first set of Club 5 links, then you should be fine. So we'll start with the upper links, and those should be the 117mm ones. And let's go ahead and do that. And since these are the upper links, I don't need to swap the pivot balls because they use a lock nut on the end, and the one on the truss is snug enough where you don't need to switch them. We can actually go ahead and remove this side as well. Alright, we're good there. Now once again, before I move on with these, I'm going to have to remove this bottom screw here for a shorter one because it protrudes a little bit and it's going to interfere with the rod end. Eventually I'll grind these screws down just a tad. For now I'm going to use that M3x12. Sorry, M2.5x12. I keep forgetting these are 2.5 size screws. Let's go ahead and remove those. Oops. Forgot to switch to pivot balls. Let me go ahead and do that first. I actually got this on the wrong side. Let me go ahead and remove the other pivot balls. I just wanted the pivot balls facing in a certain direction. It doesn't really matter, but just matters to me. So I want it like that. So I'll just use that link for the other side. Just double check the movement on that. There's a little movement, not as much as it was before, but I'm wondering if I might have to shim that. I probably will. Well, let's go ahead and remove this first, and then I'll see if I'm gonna shim that. Oh, very odd. This side seems to be okay. Nice and... oh, actually it does shift a little bit. So I probably will put like a 0.5 or 1mm shim right there. The front seems okay though, but that's basically it. That's the Club5 Racing high clearance links. You can see here the clearance right there. Okay, so now that I've got these Club5 links installed, as well as the Brazin Scale RC front shock towers and the Rocket Pirates RC rear shock towers, I'm running significantly lower. And one of the issues that happens when you run with everything raised up or with the chassis lowered down, you run into this issue where the Panhard hits the diff right there. Yeah, so this Panhard right here is kind of interfering with the full compression of the suspension, and it's hitting the diff housing right there. And so to remedy that, I went ahead and got this Hardcore RC bent Panhard link for the Enduro. And you can see that it's got this bend here that will help it clear that diff housing. So let's go ahead and get this hardcore Panhard link installed and see how much it covers the diff housing. Now you want the short side on the axle and the long side towards the Panhard mount. And that is it for the Hardcore RC Panhard link. As you can see right here, it's bent to fit or to kind of wrap over the diff housing. And let's just take a look on full compression to see if it does indeed clear the diff housing. And there you go. You can see it does clear. And I think we're good. Another issue you'll run into when you're running your suspension raised up or the chassis lowered down so much, you'll run into issues where upon compression of the axle in certain situations, like this right there, it'll hit the servo arm right there. So if you can see there, it's hitting the servo arm right there. So what you're going to need to do, you're going to need to flip this servo mount upside down the other way and mount the servo from the top, and then use spacers accordingly to raise the servo up or down as needed. So I'm going to flip my mount and I'm going to raise the servo up a little bit, and then we'll see if that fixes the issue. Okay, so let me show you guys what I did to remedy some of the binding issues that would happen if you lowered your chassis or raised your shocks up. So of course, here's the Hardcore RC Panhard rod. You'll see that you'll notice that I used a 2mm spacer here. This is of course because I'm using the Brazin Scale RC shock towers. And right here, I'm using a really low profile servo horn. You can see right there. Now this is I believe, Hobby Star servo horn, but a servo horn like the Boom Racing low profile servo horn will also work, as well as the ProTech RC or Reedy servo horn. And I'll put a link to those servo horns in the description below, as well as some of the links to the spacers and the Panhard rod. But basically, I put a 2.5mm spacer here. I used 0.5mm spacers here to raise the servo up. You'll see that it barely clears right there. And then you'll see that my suspension can go all the way up, or practically all the way up. At this point, the thing that's stopping it from going all the way up is the battery tray. But it goes up far enough. When I compress this side, it barely touches the servo horn, but it's gonna rarely do that. And on this side, it's fully clear. And that's pretty much it. And I think I'm done with suspension. So just as a recap to what we did in this video, we've added the Club5 Racing shock bushings that go on the top and the bottom of the shocks. Right there. We've added the front Brazin Scale RC shock towers that give you a raised mount for the shocks as well as a raised Panhard mount. We've added Club5 Racing high clearance links down at the bottom, made for the Enduro. And we've also added a Hardcore RC Panhard mount or Panhard rod just to clear the diff housing on compression. I've also added a few spacers to kind of correct the geometry, a 2.5mm here, a 2mm here, as well as using a low profile servo horn. This one is from Hobby Star, but you can also use a Boom Racing, Reedy, or ProTech RC one, and I'll put a link to those in the description below as well. And that about does it for the mods in this part of the series. Pretty much giving this Element Enduro chassis kit a low stance. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for the next part of my Element Enduro Builders Kit build series. Thanks for watching.